In a daring social experiment, billionaire Elon Musk disguises himself as a homeless man to see how a prestigious Beverly Hills bank treats someone who appears destitute. But before we reveal the shocking twist, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. And hey, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the streets of Beverly Hills, casting a golden glow over the palm-lined avenues. It was a city known for its glamour, where the wealthy flaunted their affluence with ease, and luxury was a way of life. Among the Bentleys and Lamborghinis parked along the pristine sidewalks, a man in tattered clothing ambled down the street, drawing curious glances from passers-by. His shoes were scuffed, his pants frayed at the edges, and his shirt hung loosely on his wiry frame. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was a peculiar confidence in his stride, as though the world around him held no power to intimidate. Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest men in the world, had carefully orchestrated his appearance to ensure he blended in, though not with the affluent elite of Beverly Hills. Today, he wanted to see life through the eyes of someone society often overlooked. His disguise was meticulous. A patchy beard, a faded baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, and clothes that looked like they'd seen better decades. But his greatest weapon was his ability to suppress the commanding aura that usually surrounded him. To the world, he was a nobody. The grand facade of First Summit Bank loomed ahead, its gleaming glass doors reflecting the brilliance of the sun. Musk hesitated briefly before stepping inside, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and curiosity. The opulence of the bank's interior was almost overwhelming. The floor was a sea of polished marble, while the vaulted ceilings bore intricate designs that seemed to echo the wealth of the institution. Customers sat in plush leather chairs sipping complimentary coffee, as sharply dressed bankers attended to their every need. The moment Musk entered, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Conversations faltered, eyes darted his way, and a few patrons exchanged whispers. He felt the weight of their judgment, their unspoken assumptions about his worth or lack thereof. Yet, he remained unfazed, his focus sharp as he approached the reception desk. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged woman with perfectly coiffed hair and an icy demeanor. Her name tag read Marilyn. She barely concealed her disdain as she took in Musk's appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone flat and devoid of warmth. "Yes," Musk replied calmly, his voice steady despite the stares boring into his back. "I'd like to open a basic checking account." Marilyn blinked, clearly taken aback by the request. She quickly masked her surprise with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Our minimum deposit for opening an account is $500, she said, enunciating each word as though speaking to a child. "Do you have the necessary funds with you today?" Musk reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "I have this," he said simply. For a moment, Marilyn's professional mask cracked, revealing a flicker of disdain. She let out a small, condescending laugh before composing herself. "I'm afraid that won't be enough," she said curtly. "Perhaps you should try a different institution, one more suited to your circumstances." The rejection stung, not because of the words themselves, but because of the sheer ease with which they were delivered. Musk glanced around the room, noting the smirks and whispers from other staff and customers. He felt an unfamiliar pang of vulnerability, a glimpse into the reality faced by countless others who lacked the privileges he often took for granted. As Marilyn gestured for a security guard, Musk noticed a young woman sitting at a nearby desk. She couldn't have been older than her mid-20s, and unlike the others, her expression wasn't one of disdain. Instead, her eyes held a mixture of curiosity and discomfort, as though she were grappling with an internal debate. Musk filed her face away in his memory before the guard's firm voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, if you don't have the required funds, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the guard said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Musk nodded silently, his mind racing. He had come here to test the boundaries of perception and humanity, and while the results were predictable, they were no less disheartening. As he turned to leave, he cast one last glance at the young woman. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that fleeting exchange, he saw something different, something he couldn't quite place. Outside, the sun was still blazing, but Musk's thoughts were stormy. The world he had created and dominated seemed far removed from the harsh realities faced by those without power or privilege. His experiment had just begun, and already it was revealing far more than he had anticipated. Inside the opulent First Summit Bank, the atmosphere buzzed with a quiet arrogance. Staff members moved with the practiced efficiency of people who catered exclusively to the elite, their tailored suits and designer shoes an extension of the bank's brand. Marilyn, the receptionist, had already dismissed Elon Musk once, but he lingered near the desk, undeterred, clutching his crumpled $20 bill. He took a deep breath and stepped forward again. "I'd like to open a basic checking account," he repeated, his voice calm but firm. Musk's unassuming demeanor, coupled with his shabby appearance, seemed almost out of place against the backdrop of wealth and privilege. Marilyn looked up from her computer, her perfectly manicured nails clicking impatiently on the counter as she sighed. "As I mentioned before," she said, her tone clipped, "our minimum deposit is $500. We don't offer services below that amount." Her words were laced with the kind of subtle derision reserved for those deemed unworthy of her time. Musk reached into his pocket and produced the $20 bill again. He smoothed it out on the counter, the faded currency starkly contrasting with the gleaming surface beneath it. "This is all I have for now," he said evenly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "But it's enough to get started, isn't it?" Marilyn's lips curled into a tight smile, the type that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, we have policies," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you'd be better off at a credit union or a community bank. First Summit caters to a different clientele." Around the room, heads turned subtly in Musk's direction. A few patrons exchanged amused glances, their whispers just loud enough to reach his ears. "The audacity," one muttered, while another chuckled under his breath. Despite the humiliation, Musk remained calm. He scanned the room, his eyes briefly locking on the young trainee he had noticed earlier. She was seated a few desks away, her head bent over some paperwork, but her frequent glances toward the reception desk didn't escape his notice. Unlike the others, her expression wasn't smug or dismissive. If anything, she looked uneasy. "Policies aside," Musk said, turning back to Marilyn, "isn't banking about helping people manage their money, no matter how much or how little they have?" Marilyn scoffed, leaning closer to lower her voice. "This is Beverly Hills, sir," she said, her tone cold. "We are not a charity." She pressed a button on her desk, summoning a security guard, who quickly approached. "Sir," the guard began, his posture imposing, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not conducting business that meets the bank's policies." His voice was firm but devoid of hostility, as though this were just another routine eviction. Musk hesitated, his grip tightening on the $20 bill. He had come here to test more than the bank's policies. He had come to test their humanity. But the walls of privilege were proving harder to penetrate than he'd expected. Reluctantly, he nodded and stepped away from the counter, but not before throwing one last glance toward the trainee. The young woman, whose name tag read Clara, seemed to wrestle with an internal conflict. Her colleagues carried on with their tasks, seemingly oblivious to the silent struggle playing out on her face. As Musk turned to leave, Clara's eyes met his. There was something in her gaze, an apology, perhaps, or a flicker of defiance. Outside, the sun was blinding, but Musk barely noticed. His mind raced, replaying the interaction over and over. The staff treated him exactly as he had anticipated, with scorn and dismissal. But Clara was different. She hadn't spoken a word, yet her expression had conveyed more empathy than anyone else in the building. Seated on a bench near the bank's entrance, Musk watched as customers came and went, their polished appearances a sharp contrast to his disheveled disguise. He thought of Clara again, wondering what kind of person she was and whether she might be bold enough to defy the rigid culture of the institution she worked for. Back inside, Clara sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she filed paperwork. She couldn't shake the image of the man at the counter. He had seemed so calm, so dignified even in the face of rejection. And while Marilyn and the others had laughed him off, Clara couldn't help but feel that they had made a terrible mistake. For the rest of the day, her mind was plagued with questions. Why did he want an account here? What brought him to a place where appearances mattered more than people? And most importantly, why had she done nothing to help? As the clock struck 5 and the bank prepared to close, Clara made a decision. Tomorrow, she would find a way to help that man, even if it meant risking her job. The next morning, Elon Musk returned to the park bench outside the bank, sitting quietly as he observed the bustling activity around him. He had no immediate plans to re-enter the building. Yesterday's humiliation was still fresh in his mind, but his curiosity about the young woman, Clara, kept him nearby. Something about her brief glances and the discomfort etched on her face had left an impression. Unlike her colleagues, she had shown traces of humanity, and Musk couldn't help but wonder if she might be the anomaly he was searching for. The day passed slowly. Clara overheard Marilyn recounting the previous day's events to another staff member. "Can you believe that guy?" Marilyn sneered, shaking her head. "He really thought he could just walk in here and open an account with $20? The nerve." Her colleague laughed, adding, "I'm surprised he didn't try to pay with pocket lint." Clara bit her lip, forcing herself to stay silent. Their ridicule grated on her, not just because it was cruel, but because it starkly contrasted with the values she had been taught growing up. She had always believed in treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. Yesterday's encounter had only reinforced that belief, but she had done nothing to act on it. The morning passed slowly. The usual parade of wealthy clients streamed through the bank, but Clara struggled to focus on her tasks. Her thoughts repeatedly drifted to the man in ragged clothes. She couldn't ignore the nagging sense of guilt that weighed on her. It wasn't just his treatment that bothered her, it was her own inaction. During her lunch break, Clara stepped outside to clear her head. The fresh air was a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere of the bank. She wandered toward the park, her gaze scanning the area almost unconsciously. When her eyes landed on the same disheveled figure from the day before, her heart skipped a beat. Musk was seated on the bench, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert as he watched the world go by. Clara hesitated, unsure whether she should approach him. She glanced back at the bank, the imposing building a stark reminder of the rules she was supposed to follow. But something inside her urged her forward. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the bench, her footsteps hesitant but deliberate. "Excuse me," she said softly, stopping a few feet away. Musk looked up, his expression neutral but curious. I wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday," she said finally. "It wasn't right, the way you were treated." Musk studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes taking in her sincerity. "You work there, don't you?" he asked, nodding toward the bank. "Yes," Clara admitted, her cheeks flushing. "I'm just a trainee, though. I don't have much say in how things are run." Musk's lips curved into a faint smile. "But you came out here anyway," he said. "That says something." Clara shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, unsure how to respond. "I guess I just wanted to tell you that not everyone there thinks the way they do," she said finally. "I don't know if it matters, but I think everyone deserves a chance, no matter what their situation looks like." "It matters," Musk said quietly, his tone thoughtful. He gestured to the empty spot on the bench beside him. "Why don't you sit down for a minute?" Clara hesitated but eventually took a seat, her nerves gradually easing. They sat in silence for a moment before Musk spoke again. "Why do you work there?" he asked casually. Clara blinked, surprised by the question. "I've always wanted to work in finance," she explained. "I thought it would be a way to help people, to make a difference. But it's not exactly what I expected." Musk chuckled softly. "No, it rarely is," he said. Clara glanced at him, her curiosity growing. "If you don't mind me asking," she said tentatively, "why did you come to our bank? There are plenty of places where you might have been treated better." Musk leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes the best way to see people's true colors is to strip away the expectations," he said cryptically. Clara frowned, confused by his words. But before she could press further, he stood up. "Thank you," he said warmly. Foreseeing me, Clara spent the night grappling with her decision. Her mind raced with the potential consequences of going against the bank's policies. Losing her job was a real possibility, but she couldn't shake the image of the man's calm yet vulnerable demeanor. Something told her he wasn't who he seemed, and she resolved to act on her instincts. The following morning, Clara arrived at the bank with a renewed sense of purpose. She kept an eye on the front entrance, hoping the man would return. Her pulse quickened when she spotted him near the park bench across the street, seated with the same quiet composure as before. During her lunch break, Clara grabbed her bag and hurried outside. Her heart pounded as she crossed the street. The man looked up as she approached. "Back for round 2?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Clara hesitated, then sat down beside him. "I wanted to apologize again for what happened," she began. "It wasn't fair, and I don't think you deserve to be treated like that." Musk tilted his head, studying her carefully. "Most people wouldn't give it a second thought," he said. "Why do you?" Clara bit her lip, choosing her words carefully. "I joined the bank to help people," she explained. "But lately, it feels like I'm just helping the people who already have everything. Yesterday reminded me why I wanted to be here in the first place." Musk nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "So what do you plan to do about it?" he asked. Clara took a deep breath. "I want to help you open an account," she said. "It might not be much, but it's a start." Back inside the bank, Clara approached her desk with a sense of determination. She logged into the system, glancing around nervously to ensure her actions wouldn't draw attention. Musk followed her inside, his demeanor quiet but observant. The other staff members barely acknowledged him, dismissing him as irrelevant. "Okay," Clara said, her voice low as she explained the process. "I can open a basic checking account for you. Normally we require a minimum deposit of $500. But I can waive that for now using my employee privileges." Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And you're willing to risk this for someone like me?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. "Everyone deserves a chance. Besides, I don't think you're just someone like me. There's something different about you." He chuckled softly, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. "You don't even know me," he said. "No, I don't," Clara admitted, "but I can tell you're not what you seem." As Clara navigated the system, Marilyn's voice cut through the air. "Clara, who's that at your desk?" she called, her tone sharp. Clara froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Just helping a new client," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Marilyn's eyes narrowed as she approached. "A new client?" she repeated, her gaze landing on Musk. "Haven't we already dealt with him?" "I'm handling it," Clara said firmly, meeting Marilyn's stare. Marilyn hesitated, clearly suspicious, but eventually shrugged, and walked away. Clara exhaled, relieved but still on edge. She quickly completed the process, handing Musk a receipt for his new account. "There," she said, her voice triumphant, "you're officially a client." Musk looked at the receipt in his hand, then back at Clara. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "But you did," she replied simply. "It's the right thing to do." For a moment, Musk said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placing it on the desk. "Thank you, Clara," he said, standing to leave. "I'll see you again soon." Before Clara could respond, he walked out of the bank, leaving her staring after him. She unfolded the paper, her brow furrowing as she read the neatly written words. "Your actions today won't be forgotten." As she slipped the note into her pocket, she couldn't help but wonder what Musk's cryptic message meant. The risk she had taken felt monumental, but the look in his eyes as he left reassured her that she had made the right choice. Under notes to Clara, her small act of defiance had set something extraordinary in motion. Musk's quiet departure wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. The following morning, Clara arrived at the bank with a lingering sense of unease. Yesterday's bold decision still weighed on her mind. While no one had openly confronted her yet, she knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed the irregularities in the system. As a trainee, she was painfully aware of how precarious her position was. She couldn't shake the memory of the man's parting words. Your actions today won't be forgotten. What did he mean? Was it a simple thank you? Or was there something more to his cryptic message? Clara felt certain that she hadn't seen the last of him. That afternoon, Clara was in the middle of helping a wealthy client when the bank's doors opened, and the man from yesterday walked in. This time, there was something different about him. Though he still wore his ragged clothes, he moved with a quiet confidence that seemed out of place against his appearance. Clara's heart skipped a beat when their eyes met, but she quickly masked her reaction. Marilyn, however, wasn't so restrained. The receptionist straightened up immediately, her face tightening with irritation. Sir, we've already explained, Marilyn began, but Musk interrupted her, holding up a hand. I'm not here to make trouble, he said calmly. I'm here to make a deposit. Marilyn blinked momentarily, stunned. Clara, watching from her desk, felt a flicker of satisfaction. Musk stepped up to the counter and pulled a neatly folded stack of bills from his pocket, sliding it across the counter without a word. Marilyn, still flustered, began counting the money. $200, she muttered, her tone begrudging. She glanced at Clara's desk, where she had handled Musk's account the day before. It seems your account is already set up, sir. I'll process this deposit. Thank you, Musk said with a faint smile, his tone polite but firm. He turned and walked toward Clara, who was still seated at her desk, her pulse quickening. You didn't expect me to come back so soon, did you? Musk said as he approached her. Clara shook her head, unable to hide her surprise. I wasn't sure I'd see you again, she admitted. He took a seat across from her desk, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I meant what I said yesterday, he told her. Your kindness didn't go unnoticed. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Clara flushed slightly, unsure how to respond. I just did what I thought was right, she said. And that's exactly why it matters, Musk replied. You took a risk. You didn't know who I was or what I could do, but you acted on principle. That's rare. Clara hesitated, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. Who are you really? She asked. Musk's expression shifted, his eyes glinting with something that looked like amusement. Let's just say I'm someone who believes in testing the system, he said cryptically. Before Clara could press further, he stood up. You've already done more for me than most people would, but if you're willing to take another chance, I'd like to ask for your help again. Clara frowned, intrigued but cautious. What kind of help? Musk leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Meet me at the park after your shift, he said. There's something I'd like to show you. The rest of Clara's day passed in a blur. She found it difficult to concentrate on her work, her thoughts consumed by the enigmatic man and his unexpected return. What did he want to show her, and why did he choose her, of all people? As the clock neared 5, Clara debated whether she should go. Meeting him outside of work felt risky, but her curiosity was too strong to ignore. By the time her shift ended, she had made up her mind. She left the bank and walked toward the park, the evening sun casting long shadows across the street. Musk was waiting for her, seated on the same bench where they had spoken before. This time, he greeted her with a smile that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken plans. Thanks for coming, he said, standing as she approached. I'm not sure I should be here, Clara admitted, glancing around nervously. You're not doing anything wrong, Musk assured her. I just want to give you a glimpse of what happens when people like you make bold choices. Clara raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. What does that mean? Musk gestured for her to follow him. Walk with me, he said. It's time you saw the bigger picture. As they strolled through the park, Clara couldn't help but feel that whatever came next would change everything she thought she knew. Not just about him, but about herself. The park was quiet, the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird filling the silence between Clara and Musk as they walked. Her curiosity simmered beneath the surface, but she held her questions, waiting for him to speak. He seemed to be contemplating his words, his usual air of mystery now tinged with a sense of purpose. Finally, Musk broke the silence. Clara, have you ever wondered why people are so quick to judge others based on appearances? He asked, glancing at her. She nodded, thinking back to the sneers and whispers she'd witnessed at the bank. All the time, she admitted. It's something I've never been able to ignore, but I don't know how to change it. Musk stopped walking and turned to face her. Sometimes the only way to change a system is to challenge it directly, he said. That's why I went to your bank. I wanted to see how people react when they think someone has nothing to offer. Clara frowned, her confusion deepening. You're testing the system? She asked, trying to piece together his motives. Musk smiled faintly. In a way, he said, I've spent most of my life building systems. Ones that shape industries, economies, even the way people think about the future. But the problem with systems is that they often forget the people they're meant to serve. Clara was struck by the weight of his words. So what are you trying to prove? I'm not here to prove anything, Musk said. I'm here to find people who still believe in doing the right thing, even when it's not easy. They continued walking until they reached a sleek black car parked discreetly near the edge of the park. Musk gestured toward it. I want to show you something, he said, opening the passenger door for her. Clara hesitated, glancing back toward the bank in the distance. Her instincts told her to be cautious, but her curiosity won out. She climbed into the car, her heart pounding as Musk slid into the driver's seat. The ride was silent at first, the city's glittering lights streaking past the windows. Musk seemed focused, his hands steady on the wheel. Finally, he broke the silence. I've been in disguise for weeks, testing banks, businesses, and other institutions, he revealed. I wanted to see how they treated people who didn't fit the mold of wealth or success. Clara's eyes widened. That's ambitious, she said, struggling to process the scope of his experiment. It's necessary, Musk said. Too often these places focus on profit and appearances rather than people. But every once in a while, I meet someone like you. Someone who sees beyond the surface. His words left Clara speechless. Before she could respond, the car pulled into an underground garage. Musk parked and led her into a nondescript elevator. As the doors slid shut, Clara's nerves heightened. When the elevator doors opened, they revealed a stunning state-of-the-art office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while sleek desks and monitors lined the room. Clara stepped out cautiously, her eyes darting around the space. Where are we? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This is one of my workspaces, Musk replied casually. A place where I plan ideas, build projects, and most importantly, gather people I trust. Clara turned to face him, her confusion giving way to awe. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Musk's expression softened. Because I think you're one of those people, he said simply. You didn't know who I was, yet you chose to do the right thing. That's rare, Clara, and I don't believe in letting rare qualities go to waste. Clara felt her cheeks flush. I don't understand, she said. What do you want from me? I want to offer you a job, Musk said, his tone matter of fact. Something far more meaningful than what you're doing now. I'm building a team of people who value integrity, innovation, and humanity. People like you. The weight of his words settled over her. Clara's mind raced with questions, but one thought stood out above the rest. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. What kind of job are we talking about? She asked cautiously. Musk smiled. One where you'll help change how institutions operate. You'll learn, grow, and contribute to something bigger than yourself. But it won't be easy. It requires courage, hard work, and a willingness to take risks. Clara hesitated, the magnitude of the offer sinking in. She thought of her life at the bank, how stifling and morally conflicted it often felt. This was her chance to break free and do something meaningful. Finally, she met his gaze and said, I'm in. Musk's smile widened, and he extended his hand. Welcome to the team, he said. As Clara shook his hand, she felt a surge of excitement and apprehension. She had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after Clara's life-changing conversation with Musk, she woke up with a sense of anticipation that she hadn't felt in years. The weight of her decision lingered, but it was buoyed by a new sense of purpose. As she prepared for her day at the bank, She couldn't help but wonder what Musk's next steps would be and how she fit into them. At the bank, things were business as usual. The same parade of wealthy clients flowed through the gleaming doors, greeted with plastic smiles and polished professionalism. Clara, however, found it difficult to concentrate. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Musk and the enigmatic opportunity he had offered. She was eager to learn more but had no idea when or how he would contact her again. By mid-afternoon, Clara had almost convinced herself that Musk's visit had been a surreal dream. But as if on cue, the bank's glass doors swung open and Musk walked in. This time, his appearance was slightly more polished, still understated, but enough to blend into the affluent surroundings. All eyes turned toward him, and a hushed murmur rippled through the lobby. Clara felt her heart leap as he made his way toward her desk. "Good afternoon, Clara," Musk said with a warm smile as he took a seat across from her. Clara blinked momentarily, taken aback by the casual familiarity in his tone. "Good afternoon," she managed to reply. "I'd like to make another deposit," Musk said, pulling a crisp stack of bills from his jacket pocket. Something a bit more substantial this time. The murmur in the lobby grew louder. Marilyn, who was watching from her desk, frowned suspiciously. Clara quickly processed the deposit, her fingers trembling slightly as she entered the amount into the system. $10,000, she whispered, her eyes widening. Musk nodded, his expression calm. "Consider it a gesture of trust," he said. Clara handed him the receipt, her mind racing. What was he doing? The sudden deposit was sure to attract attention, and she wasn't sure how to explain it if anyone questioned her. As if on cue, Mr. Reynolds emerged from his office. His sharp eyes scanned the room, and his gaze landed on Musk. His expression shifted to one of confusion and suspicion. He walked over to Clara's desk. "Is there a problem here?" Reynolds asked, glancing between Clara and Musk. "No problem at all," Musk said smoothly. "Just conducting some business." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "And you are?" Musk extended his hand. "A new client," he said with a hint of amusement. "One who appreciates the excellent service your trainee has provided." Reynolds hesitated, then shook Musk's hand reluctantly. "Well, we're glad to have you," he said, his tone less than genuine. "If there's anything I can do to assist, please let me know." Musk smiled. "Thank you. But Clara has been more than helpful." Reynolds lingered for a moment, clearly unsure of what to make of the situation, before returning to his office. Musk leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I needed to make a statement," he said quietly to Clara. "Now everyone's paying attention." As soon as Musk left, Clara was summoned to Reynolds's office. She braced herself for the inevitable questions, her pulse quickening as she stepped inside. Reynolds was seated behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said curtly. Clara obeyed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Who is that man?" Reynolds asked, his tone sharp. "He's a new client," Clara said carefully. "He came in last week and wanted to open an account. I helped him." Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "And why wasn't I informed of this?" Clara hesitated. "It was a small account at first," she explained. "I didn't think it needed to be escalated." Reynolds leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I don't like surprises, Clara. If this client turns out to be problematic, it will reflect poorly on you." Clara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I don't think he's problematic," she said. "In fact, I think he might be one of our most important clients." Reynolds raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "We'll see," he said dismissively. "For your sake. I hope you're right." That evening, Clara received a message on her phone from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, her heart pounding as she read the brief text. "You handled that well. Be ready. Things are about to get interesting." Clara stared at the message, a mixture of excitement and apprehension washing over her. Musk's cryptic words hinted at a larger plan, one she was now an undeniable part of. For the first time in her life, Clara felt as though she was standing on the edge of something extraordinary. Whatever Musk had planned, she was ready to face it head-on. The next day began like any other at the bank. Clara arrived early, her mind still buzzing from Musk's cryptic text. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. As she organized her workspace, her colleagues chatted idly, unaware of the undercurrent of anticipation running through her. By mid-morning, the calm was disrupted. A sleek Tesla Model X rolled up to the curb outside the bank, its polished exterior catching the sunlight. Heads turned as the car door opened and Musk stepped out, this time dressed in a sharp suit that exuded authority. Inside, the staff exchanged confused glances as Musk entered the lobby, his presence commanding immediate attention. Gone was the man in ragged clothes. In his place stood a figure of unmistakable power and confidence. Clara's heart raced as she realized the moment of truth had arrived. Musk approached the reception desk, where Marilyn froze, her professional demeanor faltering. "Good morning," he said smoothly, his voice carrying an edge of amusement. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Moments later, Musk was ushered into Mr. Reynolds's office. Clara watched from her desk, her hands trembling slightly. She couldn't hear their conversation, but the tension was palpable. Reynolds's expression shifted from polite curiosity to stunned realization as Musk revealed his identity. "You're Elon Musk?" Reynolds stammered, his face pale. Musk nodded, his tone calm but firm. "I am, and I've spent the past few weeks visiting institutions like yours to see how they treat people who don't fit the typical mold of wealth and success." Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but Musk held up a hand to silence him. "What I saw here wasn't impressive," Musk continued. "Your staff's behavior, except for one person, was condescending and dismissive. That's not the kind of culture a financial institution should cultivate," Musk said dismissively. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Musk, I assure you, this is an isolated incident. Our bank values all of its clients." Musk leaned forward, cutting him off. "Spare me the excuses," he said. "If not for Clara, I would have walked out of this bank and taken my business elsewhere. She's the reason I'm here now." Her actions showed integrity, compassion, and courage, qualities that are sorely lacking in your organization. The tension in the office reached a boiling point as Musk delivered his next statement. "I'm acquiring this bank," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reynolds's jaw dropped. "Excuse me," he stammered. "You heard me," Musk said. "I've already initiated the paperwork. This institution will soon be under my control, and the first order of business will be a complete overhaul of its culture and policies." Reynolds struggled to compose himself. "Mr. Musk, I'm sure we can work together to address any concerns you have." Musk smiled faintly. "Your role in this organization will be reevaluated," he said. "But for now, I suggest you start preparing for some significant changes." When Musk exited the office, the entire staff turned to stare. He walked straight to Clara's desk, his expression warm but purposeful. "Clara," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "your actions last week didn't just change my perception of this bank. They reminded me why I started this experiment in the first place." Clara blinked, stunned. "Mr. Musk," she began, but he interrupted her. "Call me Elon," he said with a smile. He pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on her desk. "I'd like you to join my team full-time, effective immediately." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Clara stared at the card, her heart pounding. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Musk replied simply. Clara looked around the room. Her colleagues' faces were a mixture of shock, envy, and disbelief. She thought of all the times she had doubted herself, the moments when she felt like her values didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. And yet, here she was, being recognized for the very qualities she had been told to suppress. She met Musk's gaze and nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. Musk extended his hand, and as Clara shook it, she felt a surge of confidence she hadn't experienced before. "This is just the beginning," Musk said quietly. As he left the bank, the staff erupted into murmurs, their eyes darting toward Clara as if seeing her for the first time. But she didn't care. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined, and for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. Clara's last day at the bank came and went in a whirlwind. The morning after her dramatic departure, she arrived at the address Musk had provided, a gleaming high-rise in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. The building radiated innovation. Its sleek design was a reflection of Musk's relentless pursuit of progress. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by a receptionist who ushered her into a private elevator. The ride up was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. When the doors opened, Clara found herself in a spacious, futuristic office. Walls of glass offered breathtaking views of the city, while the space buzzed with quiet efficiency. Musk appeared moments later, dressed casually but exuding his usual confidence. "Welcome to your new office, Clara," he said, gesturing around the room. Clara's eyes widened as she took in the scene. It was a far cry from the rigid, traditional bank environment she had grown accustomed to. "This is incredible," she said, her voice tinged with awe. Musk smiled. "You'll get used to it," he said. "But don't let the setting distract you. We have important work to do." Musk wasted no time immersing Clara in her new role. Over the next few hours, he introduced her to his core team, a diverse group of individuals who shared his vision for transforming institutions. Each member brought a unique skill set to the table, from technology and finance to psychology and design. "You're here because you bring something we've been missing," Musk explained during a private meeting: compassion, integrity, and the courage to challenge the status quo. Those qualities are rare in this industry, and we need them if we're going to succeed. Clara nodded, still trying to process the rapid pace of her new reality. "What exactly is my role here?" she asked. Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "You're going to help us redesign how financial institutions operate," he said. "We want to create systems that prioritize people over profits, that treat everyone with dignity regardless of their net worth." Clara felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. "That sounds ambitious," she admitted. "It is," Musk said with a grin. "But I didn't bring you here to do easy work." The days that followed were some of the most intense of Clara's life. She dove headfirst into projects aimed at overhauling traditional banking systems, learning everything from cutting-edge financial technology to the psychological impact of financial exclusion. Musk's leadership style was both inspiring and demanding. He pushed Clara to think creatively, to question assumptions, and to embrace failure as a stepping stone to success. While the learning curve was steep, Clara found herself thriving in the environment. One evening, as they reviewed a presentation on inclusive banking models, Clara voiced a concern that had been nagging at her. "How do we convince institutions to adopt these changes?" she asked. "They're so entrenched in their ways." Musk leaned forward, his expression serious. "We show them it works," he said. "If we can create a prototype, a bank that operates on these principles and succeeds, we'll force the rest of the industry to take notice." Clara nodded, the weight of the challenge settling on her shoulders, but for the first time, she felt like she was part of something truly meaningful. One afternoon, Clara joined Musk on a visit to a struggling community bank in an underserved neighborhood. The contrast to her previous workplace was stark. The staff was overworked, the technology outdated, and the customers desperate for help. Musk introduced Clara to the bank's manager, a weary but kind woman named Mrs. Garcia. "We're here to help," Musk said, his tone reassuring. "Clara will be leading this project." Clara blinked, taken aback. "I will." Musk nodded. "You understand better than anyone what needs to change," he said. Over the next few weeks, Clara worked tirelessly to implement Musk's vision at the community bank. She introduced streamlined processes, digital tools to simplify transactions, and training programs to empower the staff. But her most significant contribution was fostering a culture of respect and empathy, ensuring every customer felt valued. By the time the project was complete, the transformation was undeniable. The community bank had become a beacon of hope, attracting praise from industry leaders and the media alike. Clara, once a nervous trainee at a rigid institution, had grown into a confident leader who understood the power of compassion in finance. Musk watched her progress with quiet pride. "I told you this wouldn't be easy," he said one evening as they reviewed the project's success. Clara smiled. "It wasn't," she admitted. "But it was worth it," Musk nodded. "This is just the beginning," he said. As Clara left the office that night, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The man in ragged clothes who had walked into her bank weeks ago had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined, and now she was determined to pay it forward. The journey was far from over, but Clara knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, standing on the front lines of a revolution that would change the world. Clara's success with the community bank brought her recognition within Musk's organization and beyond. News of the transformation spread quickly, with articles highlighting the innovative systems and inclusive practices she had implemented. Yet Clara remained grounded, determined not to let the attention distract her from the larger mission. Musk had been right. The success of this project was only the beginning. "We're not just changing one bank," he reminded her during a strategy meeting. "We're creating a model, a blueprint for how financial institutions can truly serve everyone." Their next step was ambitious, partnering with multiple small banks across the country to replicate the success of the first transformation. Clara was placed at the helm of the initiative, her confidence growing with each challenge. But as the scope of the project expanded, so did the resistance. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Larger banks and financial institutions, threatened by the shift in public perception, began pushing back. Representatives from these institutions dismissed Musk's initiative as idealistic and unsustainable. Clara found herself in meetings where her ideas were met with skepticism and outright hostility. One particularly heated discussion with a prominent banking executive left her feeling disheartened. "This isn't how the industry works," the man scoffed. "You can't rewrite the rules." Later that evening, Clara vented her frustrations to Musk. "They don't want to change," she said. "They're too comfortable with the way things are." Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Of course they don't," he said. "People resist change when it threatens their power. That's why we need to prove them wrong." His words reignited Clara's resolve. She realized that the resistance wasn't a sign of failure. It was proof that they were making an impact. As Clara and her team moved forward, they began incorporating technology to make banking more accessible. Musk introduced her to developers and engineers who specialized in artificial intelligence and blockchain, explaining how these tools could revolutionize financial services. One evening, as Clara worked late in the office, Musk stopped by her desk. "How do you feel about this project?" he asked. Clara looked up, her expression thoughtful. "It's exciting, but it's also overwhelming," she admitted. "There's so much to learn, and the stakes feel so high." Musk smiled. "That's how you know it's worth doing," he said. "The most important work always feels impossible at first." Clara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She dove deeper into the technical aspects of the initiative, learning about innovations that could empower underserved communities, like mobile banking apps for rural areas and financial literacy programs integrated into digital platforms. Amid the whirlwind of work, Clara began reflecting on her own journey. She thought back to her days as a trainee at the bank when she had felt powerless to challenge the status quo. Meeting Musk had been a turning point, but she realized that the qualities he valued in her, compassion, integrity, and courage, had been there all along. One evening, she sat down to write a personal statement for a presentation she was preparing. As she wrote, she found herself pouring out thoughts she had never fully articulated. Finance isn't just about numbers. It's about people. Every decision we make has the power to lift someone up or shut them out. I've seen firsthand how institutions can fail the very people they're meant to serve, but I've also seen how a single act of kindness can change everything. That's why I do this work, because everyone deserves a chance, no matter where they start. The statement resonated deeply with her, and she decided to include it in her upcoming speech at a financial industry conference. The day of the conference arrived, and Clara stood backstage, her heart pounding as she prepared to address a room full of industry leaders. Musk had encouraged her to speak, insisting that her story was exactly what the audience needed to hear. When her name was announced, Clara stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She took a deep breath, her nerves steadying as she began to speak. She shared her journey, from her days as a trainee helping a man in ragged clothes to leading transformative projects that were reshaping the industry. She spoke about the importance of empathy in finance and the need to create systems that served everyone, not just the privileged few. The room was silent as she finished. Her words hung in the air, and then, one by one, the audience began to applaud. After the conference, Clara was approached by executives, entrepreneurs, and advocates who wanted to collaborate on her initiatives. The tide was beginning to turn, and Clara's vision was gaining momentum. That night, Musk congratulated her on her success. "You've done something incredible," he said. Clara smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. Musk shook his head. "You could have," he said. "You just needed someone to see it in you first." As Clara reflected on his words, she realized how far she had come. Not just as a professional, but as a person. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As Clara's projects gained national attention, the demands on her time and energy intensified. Leading multiple initiatives across various community banks required not only innovative thinking but also exceptional leadership. Clara found herself constantly juggling tasks, coordinating teams, presenting to stakeholders, and ensuring every detail aligned with the vision Musk had entrusted to her. While the work was rewarding, it was also relentless. Clara quickly learned that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about inspiring others to believe in those decisions. Her team, a mix of seasoned professionals and fresh recruits, looked to her for guidance. Some were skeptical of the changes she proposed, but others were eager to contribute but unsure how to proceed. One day, during a particularly tense meeting about integrating new technologies into an aging bank system, Clara faced open resistance from a senior team member. "We've been running these systems for decades," Alan argued. "Why overhaul something that already works?" Clara took a deep breath, resisting the urge to react defensively. "Alan, I understand your concerns," she said, her tone calm but firm. "But just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved. These changes aren't about replacing the old. They're about building something better for the people who rely on us." Her measured response diffused the tension, and by the end of the meeting, even Alan seemed more willing to listen. Despite her professional success, Clara struggled to balance her work with her personal life. Late nights in the office and constant travel left little time for friends or family. Her roommate, Kelly, noticed the change. "You're doing amazing things, Clara," Kelly said one evening as they caught up over coffee. "But don't forget to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup." Clara nodded, appreciating the sentiment but unsure how to apply it. She had always been driven by a sense of purpose, and stepping away from her work, even briefly, felt impossible. Her turning point came during a conversation with Musk after a long day of meetings. He invited her to his office for a one-on-one discussion. "You've been doing phenomenal work, Clara," he said, pouring them both a cup of tea. "But I can see the toll it's taking." Clara hesitated. "It's just, there's so much to do. I don't want to let anyone down." Musk smiled knowingly. "You're not letting anyone down by taking a moment to breathe," he said. "Leadership isn't just about action. It's about sustainability. If you burn out, you can't help anyone." His words stayed with her. Clara began setting boundaries, delegating tasks more effectively, and carving out time for herself. She realized that by taking care of her own well-being, she could show up even stronger for her team and her mission. As the year progressed, Musk unveiled an ambitious new initiative, opening a model bank that embodied all the principles Clara and her team had been working toward. The institution, aptly named Equity First Bank, would be a living prototype for inclusive and innovative banking practices. Clara was tasked with overseeing the project, a role that both excited and terrified her. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure to succeed was immense. In a meeting with Musk, she voiced her concerns. "What if we fail?" she asked, her voice betraying her anxiety. Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Failure is always a possibility," he said, "but so is success. The question isn't whether we'll encounter obstacles. It's how we'll overcome them. And I believe in your ability to do just that." With his encouragement, Clara threw herself into the project. She assembled a diverse team of experts and worked tirelessly to bring the vision to life. From the architecture of the building to the technology used in daily operations, every detail was designed to reflect the values of accessibility, transparency, and human connection. When Equity First Bank finally opened its doors, Clara stood before the building, her heart racing with pride and anticipation. It was more than just a bank. It was a symbol of what was possible when financial systems were designed with humanity at their core. As she looked out at the bustling city, Clara knew that the journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be.